Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's episode is a coaching episode with Samantha. Samantha is a mom of 2 little boys who are 4 and 5, and she is new to peaceful parenting. I met her because she was a student in my Transform Your Family Life course, which is not open right now for general enrollment. But if you wanted to get on the wait list, you can go to sararosensweet.com/parenting course, just in case it sounded like something you might be interested in. And anyhow, I met her because she is transitioning from using more traditional parenting approaches that really weren't working with especially her older son, who is one of those kids that we call our more or extra kids, right? The kids who are more intense. And she really wanted to kind of get some feedback on, how she might be able to improve what she was doing, or she was wondering if she was actually doing it right. Although we don't like to say right and wrong, she felt like things were so hard. Is there something that she should be doing differently in terms of peaceful parenting? So we tackled her son's big feelings and, how there was some fighting between the 2 boys and her son's sensitive nature and her own sensitive nature and how that comes up in her parenting. Be sure to stick around to the end because we checked in again in 3 weeks just to see how things went for her. And I wanted to just remind you also, if you are interested in coaching, either myself or my team of Corey or Stoney would be happy to support you. And if you're interested in coaching and what we can offer you, you can go to sararosensweet.com, and there is a link there for you to sign up for a free short consult if you're interested in working with either me or one of my wonderful parenting coaches, because you really don't need to struggle alone. We can really help you to make things easier. You will hear that things, how we help Samantha, or how I help Samantha, I guess. So without any more blathering on my part, let's go ahead and meet Samantha. Hi, Samantha. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sam. I've got 2 boys. Thomas is 5 and Dawson is 4. And they are energetic and fun and awesome. And still, I would love some input on how to help them to grow happy and healthy.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll try and sort you out here. Okay. So how can I support you? What are you struggling with? What could you use some support on?
I guess the biggest thing right now is, so I've been following everything on peaceful parenting for a couple of months now, and I've really noticed a lot of improvements. So we are in this sort of progress mode here. But one of my biggest triggers is noise, which I think is pretty relatable. I think a lot of people have said that. Mm-hmm. But I think my oldest really copes with his stress with noise.
Yeah.
And feels rejected if you've talked about in the podcast and stuff, take space if you're feeling really hijacked. But then he feels rejected when I'm taking space when he's hijacked. So I'm sort of in this limbo mode of, do I stay even though I'm triggered, or do I leave and trigger him more? I don't really know how to do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So is he in kindergarten? Is he SK or JK?
He's in SK. Yeah.
Okay. And is Dawson in JK?
He's in JK. Yeah. They're in the same class.
For our non-Canadians, it's senior kindergarten and junior kindergarten.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, okay, now this may sound totally obvious, and maybe you've already done this, but have you ever tried wearing earplugs?
I just saw that loop is a thing. Somebody in one of your podcasts said that they also are triggered by noise and have headphones. I've just ordered mine, so they're
good
here, but I haven't actually tried them yet. So
yeah, good. All right. Well, let me just tell you a few tips about starting to use them. First of all, it's really, really common to be triggered by noise. And it's a nervous system trigger, right? It registers, noise can register as threats in our nervous system. We don't have any control over that. Like what our nervous system decides is a threat, it decides as a threat. I mean, we can recognize that that's happening and take steps to calm ourselves when we recognize that we're having that nervous system response, like the fight, flight, or freeze, right? That's what the trigger is. That's how we're triggered into fight, flight, or freeze. So when you can do a few things like you can say, even though it's really noisy, I'm safe and this is not an emergency. So you can use those kinds of self-talk when you do get triggered by noise. However, it's really helpful to try and do something about the trigger, which is why we say use some earplugs. So I would tell your boys, how mama sometimes gets upset when it gets really noisy. You know what? I've got these new earplugs, and they could even try them. And you can say, I still will be able to hear you. That's the thing that I want all parents who use earplugs to be able to tell their kids, because you don't want them to think like, oh, she's totally like shutting me out here, right?
That's
So I
kind
would
of
say,
why I have hesitated to use them. I don't want them to see me like, okay, I'm tuning you out now, that kind of thing. But like, so if there's language I can use to help support
yeah.
them, yeah.
So, and they can even try it to see that
Right.
they can still hear
Okay,
when
right.
they're wearing the earplugs, and just say it just helps. It helps it so it doesn't, so the noise doesn't. And I'm saying this in a specific way. It's not your yelling doesn't hurt my ears. It's so the noise doesn't hurt my ears, right? Because you've said that Thomas is really sensitive, and so the language is important. That it's the noise, so the noise doesn't hurt my ears, rather than your yelling doesn't hurt my ears, and just say and so I can help you. When you're upset, this will help me to stay more calm and the noise won't hurt my ears so much. So I'm going to be putting these earplugs in when things get noisy. And don't worry though, because I'll still be able to hear you. So that's what I would do with that. And that might help reduce the triggering a little bit.
I'm glad you said that about the language because he is very sensitive. So if he picks up on every nuance in mood, in facial expression, in sort of, and I was like that as a kid as well. So I get it, but he takes things as rejection very quickly, even if it's just a brief moment of frustration or trying to reset myself and sort of bring in these mantras that I'm trying. He sees every change in my reaction. So it's hard. It's kind of like eggshells with him a little bit because I don't want to hurt his little tender feelings. So,
Well, I think you can also say something similar. Let me think for a second. What would you say to him? Because okay, so sensitive people need help with emotional boundaries. Like sensitive people really actually need to be sort of explicitly learn or be taught emotional boundaries. Like basically other people's upset is not your fault or your problem.
that's something I'm still trying to learn as an adult. So,
Yeah, totally, right? So I think even to say to him something like, you know what, let him know that even if he does something, it's still your responsibility to take care of your own feelings. So even saying something to him like that, like my feelings are my responsibility. It's mama can take care of her own mama feelings, and it's not your fault. It's not because of you.
yeah, that's an angle I haven't really tried yet because he does feel so guilty when he has these huge, loud meltdowns. He feels upset after because sometimes, another reason why I have to stay with him when he's having a lot of sounds happening is because he tends to break things or sometimes he'll scratch himself. Not a lot, like it's not like breaking the skin or anything, but he does pinch himself and scratch himself. So that's not something I want to have happening. So I tend to stay with him, to hold him. So the noise is kind of like right there. And then we're both hijacked at the same time.
Yeah, well, hopefully the earplugs are gonna help that, and I think you can just say to him, even when mama gets upset, it's not your responsibility to make me feel better or make sure I'm okay, like, and of course, we want our kids and we want them to care about other people and their feelings, but the line is, like, caring about it versus feeling responsible for it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, that's a good distinction. I'll have to teach him that that there's a line between them.
Yeah, yeah. So it's sort of like the big idea is it's not your fault or your problem if I get upset. It's for me to take care of myself.
I love that. I have not actually tried that before, so I'm going to definitely start using that today. Yeah.
It's hard when he's so sensitive. And I think another thing I think that's important with sensitive kids is that when you do have to correct him, you've probably heard, you said you listen to the podcast a lot, so you've probably heard me talking about this, but that you lead with empathy. So so say he, I don't know, hits his brother or something. You must have been so upset to hit your brother. And the parentheses in there is, I still think you're a good person. because that's the whole thing with sensitive people. When they think someone's upset with them, they feel shame and they feel like bad people. So anytime you can get kind of like say the benefit of the doubt or say what you thought his intentions were before you talk to him about whatever it is you need to talk to him about.
Okay, yeah. The other thing I've been really working on with him is to try to explain that sort of like our reactions are separate from who we are. So, what you're saying, I've been trying to sort of play around with kid-friendly language around that. So you can have a bad mood, but not be a bad person, sort of thing. And that's different. So we've been really, really working hard with that because he completely conflates the two. Like if he does anything wrong, he must be a wrong person, like basically is how it's very concrete for him, no matter what we say. So it's a lot of sort of building a foundation of, no, that's not the case. You're separate from your moods. Like, let's figure out what's happening for you to fix them and things like that. So it's a long road, I think, but
It is for sensitive people. It definitely is. And I think it's that I've heard people say the difference is saying like, I'm feeling sad versus I am sad. That's maybe what you're talking about. But I also think the main thing you're talking about is that you're trying to teach him self-compassion, which as adults, it's hard for us sometimes because when we do something that we feel bad about, we tend to go into that shame spiral, right? Of I yelled at my kid 5 times today and I'm not worthy and lovable, right? So, as adults, we have to like actually start to learn that I'm worthy and lovable, even though I yelled at my kid 5 times today, right? So that's what you're trying to teach him. And you could even say those words to him. What might be something that he gets upset about and sort of beats himself up about?
he has a lot of triggers. He's very particular about how things, like, people often ask me if he's on the spectrum. He's not. Like, he's been checked out. He's just sort of very particular. So if his brother touches a toy that is his, or if his bed is ruffled in a certain way, he'll sort of melt down very quickly, especially with clothes. Like if his socks are bunched up the wrong way, he likes to wear his socks over top of his pants. And if they're not done properly, then he will just kick and scream and sort of break down. So
What
that's a
kind of
big one.
assessment did you get?
The pediatrician sat and had spoke with him. So not like a full assessment. She sort of ruled it out. I don't know if that's, yeah.
I mean, I don't have an opinion on whether or not he's autistic. However, there are a lot of newer there let me put it this way. There are a lot of kids who maybe autistic who a pediatrician might not be trained well enough to be able to tell. However, what isn't sticking out to me, autism isn't what's sticking out to me. It's sensory processing stuff that's sticking out to me when you talk about that.
Which is how I came to this highly sensitive person, which is sort of what she sort of rerouted me to. Because when he's not melting down, he doesn't present like that at all. It's just when he gets stuck on something and then can't kind of fix himself out of it.
There's disagreement about this, but I have read a few autistic advocates who say that highly sensitive is let me get this right. Highly sensitive is autism with privilege, whether it's privilege, and the privilege I get is privilege around supportive people around you who are helping you navigate the world. So there's at least a lot of overlap between autism and highly sensitive. But what the sensory stuff that I'm talking about is also, that the sort of the sensitivity to textures and fabrics. Are there any other sensory things that stick out for him?
Not really. It's very specific to the socks, the sensory stuff, as well as, if we go to a place that's very loud. So he, like I have, is bothered by noise, which is why it's so fascinating to me that noise seems to be his outlet. So if we go to a place that's very busy and very noisy, he gets very, very quiet and distressed, and he won't leave my side, which is fine. I always encourage he can stay as long as he wants to. But he is very, very upset by lots of noise that isn't his own making.
Yeah. Well, that's actually not uncommon for kids who have some sensory sensitivities to use noise to like humming or singing or repeating words to actually regulate themselves.
Okay, that's good
If
to
the noise
know.
is coming from themselves, it doesn't seem to be as triggering as the noise that's not
Yeah,
coming from
yeah,
themselves.
that seems to be the case for him.
In fact, it's regulating. So in terms of, whether or not he is neurodivergent, maybe someday you might want to look into another assessment if he continues to have a lot of challenges, or you can just think about what does his nervous system need? Whether or not you have some sort of official diagnosis or assessment, like, what does this kid need to thrive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. You were talking about sort of humming as a self-soothing. When he's really hijacked, will sort of, I think I told you in my notes, he sort of splutters and he will sort of make this deep grinding, like, kind of sound. I don't want to get too loud on a podcast, but he's just got this loud noise that he does just in the moment that he can't. And then he doesn't do it at other times of day. It's only specifically when he's sort of in a meltdown situation.
Well, some kids do growling, like a growl.
Yeah, that's how I would kind of describe it.
It's almost just a facet of the fight response, I think. Maybe even kind of like a dog or, another animal growling.
Yes.
It's just like,
yeah.
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 So if you can just like, oh, yeah, he's hijacked, he's doing his growling thing again, and just think about, how can I soothe myself so that I can, grab those earplugs, remind yourself that you can handle it.
Yes.
It's not an emergency, or whatever you do to try and calm yourself, and then be that soothing presence for him when he's having that upset.
It has really, truly helped to sort of reframe things to he's having a hard time. That was something that was really hard for me to set aside, like my own fight flight, and think like, I'm having a hard time with this, but so is he. So how do we sort of like figure this out at the same time so that he doesn't feel rejected if I leave, but also the headphones I think will be really helpful so that I'm not getting escalated when he's also escalated. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing to think about is, so there's responding in the moment to the meltdowns, but also like what builds up to the meltdowns? Like do you think there's anything that we can look at sort of preventively?
I'm in the parenting course right now. The what's it called again? The Turn Your Life
Transform
Around.
Your Family Life.
Yeah. I'm really excited about the sibling rivalry aspect that we're getting to, because that is a huge sort of instigator right now in our house. Dawson is much more easygoing with things. And so we'll share his toys quite easily, but Thomas is very strict about, no, that is mine. You cannot touch it. You can't move it. You can't do anything. So a lot of the meltdowns lately, the older he gets, the fewer he has separate from his brother. It all focuses around Dawson lately, I find.
Okay. Like what kinds of stuff might happen, or give me a recent example we can kind of talk through.
Well, let's see. So last night was a rough night for Thomas. He has some goalie pads. He really wants to be a goalie. He likes to play hockey. He just wants to be a goalie. So my husband got him special goalie pads that at the time were for him, which of course, but now we only have one set of goalie pads, and Dawson casually just wants to test them out from time to time when Thomas isn't using them. But he happened to put on one of the goalie mitts, and Thomas was just beside himself with rage. He fought him. He got it back. He hid it. He laid down on top of the place where it was hidden. And we were very careful to say, that's fine. It would be nice if you could share, but if you're not interested in sharing, that's okay. But I don't think he quite heard us. He was already upset because he was saying Dawson made it dirty. He's a dirty boy. He wasn't unclean. He was just, He cannot stand the thought of his brother touching anything of his own. So now it's, tarnished because his brother happened to put the goalie mitt on. And so for the rest of the night, we tried distracting him with other activities, and he would rip up his drawings, or he would throw his toy across the room because he was so upset about this one instance with Dawson that it just dissolved the whole night into chaos, basically.
Okay. So let's just back up a little bit. That's a great example. First of all, I love that you actually are going to protect that they're his goalie equipment, because that's one of the things you're going to learn. I think it's next week that the siblings module comes out in the course. So what you're going to learn in that is that each kid should have things that are just their own, that they don't have to share. And I know I don't know how much goalie equipment costs. It probably wouldn't be easy to get Dawson his own goalie equipment, but it is fair if this really was specially bought for Thomas. And maybe next time you can think about, if there are any big purchases, that you make it clear from the beginning, like it's kind of this ship has sailed for this set of goalie equipment. But, because they're so close together, if there are things that you're going to buy that you're only going to buy one, I would make sure that you buy it that it's for them to share.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Not just for one of them.
Yes. These are lessons we're learning as we go.
Yeah, exactly. But because this particular thing is just Thomas's, you really have to say he doesn't have to share it, in which I know you are saying that. I'm just saying that for people who are listening. One of the big ideas of helping siblings not have rivalry is that you having these good sharing and property rules where, each person has something that if it's, bought for them or for their birthday or bought with their own money or whatever, they never have to share it if they don't want to. And the parent's job is to sort of help them enforce that by, supporting them and like, oh, yeah, I know you'd really like to use your brother's goalie equipment. You know what, though? Those are his, and we don't have to share anything that we don't want to. For anyone who wants more on that, I do have a little ebook about siblings, which off the top of my head, I can't remember the link, but we'll put the link in the show notes that goes over all of this in more detail. However, so, great going forward. We're going to protect the goalie equipment and not let Dawson use it unless Thomas says it's okay. What I want to know is, how did you respond to Thomas after this had happened? Because you said it upset him for the rest of the night. So I'm wondering if, this comes up again, if we can kind of maybe shorten that upset. So what did you do or say?
Well, I just told him, it's okay that you don't want to share. That was something that was like, we made such a big deal of presenting him with this goalie stuff that we couldn't now be like, oh, by the way, it's also Dawson's. So like,
Yeah.
I was very protective of it.
Good.
But I said, if, because Dawson was also melting down at that point because his feelings were hurt that he didn't get to share. So because there was a little bit of hitting going on, I said, perhaps right now we'll set these things aside, but we'll try again tomorrow. I'm really trying hard to use the language I've learned in your podcasts. So I set the goalie stuff aside so that it didn't turn into physical problems. And then I said, how about Thomas, you and I get some one-on-one time and we'll just draw while Daddy plays with Dawson.
Okay, great. So you had two parents there, which is great.
So which was very lucky because sometimes these things happen when I don't have backup. So it was pretty good. But it didn't really seem, I think he was just really tired. I think honestly, it was just sort of like back to the basics. I think he was just exhausted and needed an early bedtime. So that's what we did in the end because nothing was working.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if okay, so say the similar thing comes up again and he's just really upset and you can take him off to have time just with him. I wonder if you could lean into the upset and really just help him cry about it and just like lots of empathy and just like, oh, your brother used your goalie equipment and you didn't want him to. And oh, this is so hard because the goal is like, if you can cry about something, Gordon Neufeld calls them the tears of futility. If you can get to that point where it's just like, there's nothing to be done and you can just cry about it because there's, he touched the stuff and now it's, dirty or whatever. If he can just really get to those tears, that will help him process his feelings about it. Because it sounds like his feelings were kind of sticking around and you said he was kind of difficult for the rest of the night.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if this happens again, if you can just think, okay, we've got to get him to cry and get him to cry by just so much compassion and empathy. And so hard because really it's not about the goalie equipment. It's representative of everything, how, Dawson came along and took his place as the baby. He has to share you and his dad with his brother. And also this comes up a lot when you have one sibling who is more easygoing and one who's more sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
The more sensitive one can see that the other one's life is easier.
Yeah. Well, I think I said that in my notes. He notices because he, like I said, is very sensitive. We have never said this to him, nor has anyone else, but he will describe Dawson as the cute one because people respond differently to him out, when we visit grandparents and things. Like the reaction is so visibly different that I'm much more protective of Thomas, which kind of changes the dynamic, but he really does notice just all on his own. It's hard.
Yeah, and he notices that that Dawson, he doesn't get in as many conflicts with you and his dad, and his life is just easier because he's more easygoing, and that's actually true. Like for sensitive people, life is harder. So there's that aspect too. Like not only is he the younger sibling he's got to share, his life with, but his life is actually easier. So if anyone listening is like, why is she encouraging this mom to make such a big deal about the goalie equipment? It's like the goalie equipment is representing everything that's hard about his life having to do with his brother. So it's not that, and on the other hand, we don't get to choose what people are upset about. So maybe, for him, obviously it really is about the goalie equipment. But for us, we know we're helping him process all these big feelings that are underneath and, in his emotional backpack.
And I
so
can
leaning
assure
into
anyone
the
listening
topic,
that it's not just the goalie equipment.
yeah. Yeah. So, you're leaning into it about the goalie equipment, but it's helping him with everything that's in his emotional backpack. But on the surface, he thinks he's crying about the goalie equipment. So you can say just like, oh, your brother touched it and you didn't want him to, and this is so hard. And just really just try to get him to cry about it.
Yeah, I have. That's something that I heard you say that recently. I haven't tried that yet. That's something that's kind of new here because right now we're just sort of learning how to help him through the meltdowns, not help him have
Have a
a
meltdown.
meltdown. Yeah. So I'll have to change my thinking around that one a little bit.
Well, it can be counterintuitive because you want him to feel better, you want him to move on, you want to get on with the night. At the same time, when those feelings are sticking around, it's going to make him more difficult, right? He's going to be on edge. You're going to be walking on eggshells. So really, we want to just try to get to the tears. And also, I think, when we do that, and when kids do need to cry, we encourage it. It makes them have a less full backpack for when, going through the rest of the day and the next day.
Right. Yeah. What would you suggest for, so during that meltdown, he did try to bite me, which we just sort of, I held him sort of back a little bit, not pushing him or anything, but just sort of held him back so that he couldn't. And I said, I'm not going to let you bite me, but I'm going to stay and hold you. Cause I managed to stay calm enough to stay. We managed to get through the bedtime routine. And then when we were laying down together, I just spent extra time laying in bed with him before I left the room for bedtime, just to give him that, like, I'm not mad at you ongoing. Like, this is not a thing I'm upset about. That was just a bad moment. We can do better tomorrow. What, like, how do you bring that up after? Because he mentioned it again this morning. Like, remember when I tried to bite you? I'm a bad boy, like that kind of thing. But just like,
Oh, yeah.
no, that was, I don't recommend you doing that again. I didn't say
Yeah.
that, but it's like, how do you tell a 5-year-old, maybe try this next time? I just stuffy. I don't know.
Yeah, the fact that he brought it up again tells me that he's got some shame around
He
it and he's
does so
feeling bad
much.
about
Yeah.
it. So we don't need to bring it up in a corrective way. Like, I'm going to exaggerate for the purposes here, but yesterday when you bit me, biting is not okay. We don't bite in our house. We don't want to do any of that. He already knows that, right? Like there's no information gap where he thinks biting is okay. So what the healing that has to happen is around, he needs to feel like, as I was back to the beginning when we started talking, he needs to feel like you still think he's a good person. And that's why he brought it up, because he feels bad about it. So you can say to him, and he says, "Oh, what did he say again? Remember yesterday when I bit you?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, "I'm a bad boy."
He did. He
So
does.
you
He
can
says that a
say like,
lot. Yeah.
you can say you can say there's no such thing as bad boys. There's
That is, yeah.
only, yeah,
Okay.
there are only boys who sometimes are having a hard time. That's what
Yes.
I would say.
Okay. That's not language we say at home. Like, bad is not a word I say, but they say it at school to each other. That's the biggest insult you can throw at your friend is, well, you're a bad boy. So now he uses it to internalize when he's feeling like he's struggling at home. He says, well, then I am a bad boy.
Yeah,
So we're
that's
just trying
natural.
to,
Well, you can say like, there's no such thing as bad boys. There's only boys who sometimes have a hard time. So what you want to say to him is, you want to say something, I know that was so hard, wasn't it? You were so upset. And remember before, when I was saying you like lead with empathy so that he knows you still think he's a good person. So you were so upset. You tried to bite me, huh? Yeah, everybody does things sometimes when they get upset. They do things that they don't want to do. And that happens sometimes. That happens to everyone. So just letting him know, like, yes, this happens. People get, they get upset and they do things that they don't want to do. And you can say that even happens to grown-ups sometimes. You know how sometimes when I yell at you, when I get really upset and I yell at you and I'm trying not to yell, sometimes I get upset too and I do things that I don't want to do. So you want to just normalize it. Like I'm not saying that normalizing it, you're saying it's okay. You're just saying like this happens to everybody. Everybody gets upset and does things they don't want to do. And then you might be able to say, what do you think we could do next time when you're feeling really upset like that? Maybe you could, if you feel like you need to bite, and for a sensory kid, biting is probably a way that he's trying to, whether it was that he's feeling aggression or trying to regulate, in some ways they're the same thing, right? When the body gets hijacked by the fight response, the body wants to move, right? Like that's a motive, it's mobilizing. So you could say when you're feeling upset, maybe you could you said bite a stuffy or bite a
yeah,
stuffed animal or
something
something
that's not
like
me.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, or you could say, if we want to really try to even redirect that, you could say, maybe when you're feeling really upset, you could stomp your feet, or you could say, I'm mad, or I don't like this,
Yeah.
right?
To
And
get the
if
physical
it,
stuff out.
yeah. So for people who can't see me, I'm like clenching my fists and like shaking them, like I don't like this. I'm mad, and stomp your feet. You can shout, like you can encourage him to shout.
Yeah. Kind of direct the noise that he seems
Yeah,
to need to make. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think you did the right thing, though. It's really, try not to let him do it because then he's going to feel even worse if he actually
Yeah.
bites you and hurts you.
Hmm.
So it sounds like you're on the right track with that.
That's good. Thank you. I'm trying to use sort of his friends as examples when, at school, if they have a bad day with each other, they'll say, "Oh, I'm not your friend anymore." And then he'll come back and say, "Oh, my friend played with me again today. I'm surprised. I thought he hated me because he said he didn't want to play with me one time." And so we're talking a lot about, oh, yes, that friend also has bad moments, but isn't a bad person. They're
Good,
still your friend the next day. So I'm really trying to use those as teaching moments for him.
good,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, you can say like just like when your friend got upset and said he didn't want to be your friend anymore, and we all sometimes get upset and say things we don't mean.
Yeah, he did pull a bit of a sucker punch on me. I've been telling him about, he has sat and listened to some of the podcasts with me, and we've watched you on video, so he knows what you look like now, Sarah. He knows that I'm trying really hard not to yell and be a calmer parent. The other day, I did have a rough day. It was a rainy day. We were stuck inside. They were just fighting constantly. And I did yell. And he said, "You're not listening to your parent coaching." Oh, wow. Zing.
That is so funny.
Yeah. So we
Oh,
created a sticker rewards chart for me.
good. The
So
respectful
far.
voice
Yeah.
chart.
It's
Good. That's awesome.
they're having fun with it. So,
Good. Yeah. I mean, he sounds really smart too.
oh, he's so smart. Like, I can't keep up with him sometimes. He's so smart. He's way ahead of me. Yeah.
There's a designation. Have you heard of twice exceptional?
Twice exceptional. No, I haven't.
Yes. Sometimes it's called bright and quirky or
Okay.
2E, twice exceptional. And it's for kids it's basically a special ed sort of designation for kids who are really bright or gifted, plus have some other challenges. I mean, gifted itself is a neurodivergent category, but often kids who are gifted, there are often other things that go along with that. Like they could have some learning challenges or ADHD or sensory stuff or autism or I mean not obviously not every gifted kid also has something else, but there often are other things that go along with that. Even if it's just asynchronous development, and by that I mean he's super bright, but maybe, a little bit lagging skills in his emotional regulation.
Yeah. I feel like that's a good description, really a good description, because he sees so far ahead in terms of like, I know how people are going to be feeling, but I don't know how to change how I am doing things. So, yeah, I'll honestly take all the resources just to help him out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, look up to me and see what you find. I also think 5 can be a very hard age because especially when you have a bright 5-year-old, because they seem so competent, you can teach them to play chess and you can have big conversations about, the solar system or whatever, and they still melt down like a baby sometimes, you know? And so it can be really hard and you think, "Ah, this kid, why is this happening?" Well, their brains are still really immature even if they're smart. Even if they're really bright, they are not further ahead in their, development of impulse control or self-regulation.
right. Yeah. And he is the kind of little guy who every time he went through a developmental leap, he would get grouchy for a week or two. And we always knew, okay, he's going to come out speaking French after this. Something is going to change. And it was always so very obvious after this 2 week interval of just chaos that he had this sort of like mental development
He was
leap.
working on
So
something.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
we're wondering if he's sort of in the middle of one again now, because it's
maybe.
been a bit more taxing with him. But
Is he anywhere near his birthday or his half birthday?
his birthday's in August, so
Okay.
he'll be
So
6
not really.
in August.
Sometimes around kids have like sort of 6-month periods of equilibrium and disequilibrium at this age. So I don't know, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'll look into that too.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, why don't we check in again? And well, was there anything else you wanted to ask me about before we hang up?
No, I don't think so. I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've got a lot for you to work on. I want to hear how the earplugs go
Yeah, to try that.
and teaching him those emotional boundaries and leading with empathy when he does do something wrong or you need to talk to him about something or even just when you're sportscasting when he's, having a hard time about something.
That's one of my favorite strategies that I learned from you is just naming what's happening and not actually getting involved in any of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So even just like really putting some empathy in there, when you're talking to him about it and leaning into the upset to get to the tears, hopefully to help him empty that emotional backpack.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to
And
try
anything
that
else
for
we
sure.
talked about that I forget.
What's that?
I said, and anything else that we talked about that I forget now.
Yeah.
But okay, well, we'll check in with you in a couple weeks or a month, and we'll see how things are. And just for you and for anyone else listening, even if you're doing, and this is the podcast that came out last week, and now I can't remember what episode it was because it'll be a while now, where I had on some parents. I think it's called When Parenting is Hard. If you have a really intense kid, there, even if you're doing everything quote right, it's still going to be hard sometimes. So you can't judge, you know, are we having smooth sailing? Okay, that must mean that I'm doing a good job versus our things are hard. That must be I'm doing a bad job, because sometimes you can be doing all of the things and things are still hard. So it's really important to just have so much compassion for yourself and remind yourself that I've got a really intense kid, got a really sensitive kid, and it's as he gets older, he'll smooth out. But right now, when he's little, there are going to be hard days, no matter what you do.
It's so good to remember that. Sometimes they feel sort of monumental. And then there was something that you said in the course. Will you forget about this? Will you laugh about this in a few days or a few weeks or next year? Will any of this matter? And I'm really trying to focus on that because so much of it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, let go of the small stuff for sure. Reduce those points of friction and let go of the small stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, it was good to meet you, and I will talk to you in a couple weeks.
Great. Thank you so much.
Hey, Samantha, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, how have things been since we talked last?
Yeah, so I love the earplugs. Those are a lifesaver. Honestly, those have been really, really helpful because both of my kids are going through I think they're going through growth spurts and they've just both been so challenging right now. So I feel like having sort of the fallback of the earplugs has been really helpful.
Good.
Yeah, so we talked last time about the sort of the sibling rivalry things, which have been those have been sort of leveling out. We've been doing a lot of strategies to try to keep them, like to give them one-on-one time, which has been working. But in particular, Thomas, who I said was sort of the more sensitive of my two, has been into sort of, he's just having some struggles with, he's challenging. He likes to sort of have things his own way. And if he doesn't, then he likes to use swear words at us and he likes to sort of tip things over. A good example is we were at a friend's house. He loves these friends. They're really, really good friends. They went to preschool together and they've grown up together. And he just got so angry that we weren't going inside of their house that those really expensive little cars that kids can get to drive around?
Yeah. The battery, like actual
Yes,
battery cars.
exactly. He fully tried to flip one over in a temper tantrum, and so we had to leave. We just sort of went home. We didn't get mad at him, but
Good.
we set the limit and we went home. And then it was so impactful not being angry with him. It was just sort of, you're having a really hard time. You must be overtired. We're just going to go home. We'll try again. All the language that I've learned from you.
Oh,
Because,
I love that.
yeah. So I think I mentioned last time that this is a little guy who struggles with shame and guilt. So after that night, I spent a really long time just snuggling him to try to help calm him down because he was just having a rough night. And he started crying so hard, saying, "Do you think I'll be allowed to go back there? Do they still like me?" So it really
Oh,
showed for me that even in because I was struggling, I personally wanted to just go home and cry myself because I was like, oh, we can't even have a night out with friends. And I was feeling so resentful, but also trying to be empathetic. And then being able to stay with that was really helpful for him because then I saw that even in his absolute most challenging moments, he is really just like what you always say, just trying to be a good kid. He doesn't want to get into trouble. He's just really struggling. So I thought that was a good sort of epiphany moment for me.
let's just unpack that for a second, because that's really powerful, I think, because Corey and I were talking about this the other day, and I think what stops some people from being able to fully embrace the not punishing kids model is that they don't really believe that kids want to be good, right? There's fear that, like, oh, just taking your example, if we don't do something to show him that that behavior is unacceptable, he'll never learn. But the fact that you said you could, like, just be, holding the limit and be compassionate and not, I forget the word, even though I just said it, I forget the exact words you said, but something about not getting angry at him. And getting angry at someone, even if we don't do it on purpose, kids can experience that as punishment, right? And so, but because you didn't do that, you were able to see that he really was sorry and he didn't need anyone to tell him
Yeah,
that
like
that wasn't cool.
my reaction didn't lead him, my angry reaction, what I would normally have done, didn't lead him to the sort of guilt that he faced later. He met that just on his own because I was there for him, I think, which was really interesting for me. I had not really seen that because I have never not reacted before. So I think that was really good for all of us to see that.
That's so good. And I bet he had a lot less shame. Like, and I know you said that he had some shame around, like, will they invite me back? But it was probably a lot less than it would have been if you had also been angry at him on top of that.
I think so. And I think it would have been more intense if I had been angry with him, because he would have felt it more and would have met that roadblock of not being able to talk to me about it. He has never just sort of easily said to me until much later, after an incident has sort of happened where we're all sort of hijacked and everything. So I thought that it helped him to settle much quicker because we were actually able to talk about it without that sort of angry wall between us. So I thought that was really good.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. And, just going back also to what you said about that he is just your more challenging child. A lot of people who are doing peaceful parenting feel like, well, if it isn't all sunshine and roses, I must be doing something wrong.
I feel like that
And
all
I think
the
this is like
time.
a perfect, well, that's not reality. Like if, let me say it this way, if you weren't doing peaceful parenting, things would be harder than they are. But when you are doing peaceful parenting and you're relatively consistent, you don't have to be perfect. When you're relatively consistent, it doesn't mean things are going to be easy. So just because they're not easy, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong.
That's sort of something else. I had sort of a couple of epiphanies since the last time we talked. I often talk to Thomas about, you are a good kid who just makes, sometimes we all make bad choices, or like we can do things differently the next time. Or I'm trying to use the language that separates him. Like, your identity isn't a bad person because you did something that made people angry or frustrated, like his friends or things like that. But I've never applied that language to myself as a parent. So because, like I said, they've really been challenging lately. So we decided to have them go to my dad's for the weekend. So
Nice.
we were
A
away.
break.
Yeah, we needed it so badly. So we had from Saturday morning till Sunday late afternoon just on our own. And it was just such a weird moment to think, like, we're just very quiet, calm people who, like, all we wanted to do was sit and drink some tea, read a book, and go antiquing. And it was so nice to do that. And then the kids come back and they're instantly screaming at each other and flipping stuff over because they're so excited to see all their toys, and yelling and demanding a snack. And I thought, wow, I struggle sometimes because this is just hard. It's not because I'm a bad parent. It's just really hard because they have so much energy that, I don't know. I don't equal their energy. So it was good for me to see, me as a person. I'm not this angry, stressed out person just by myself. Sometimes the moments are just challenging. And I thought it was good to see that for myself so that I can try to start hopefully shaping my own language around that.
Good.
Hopefully,
Good.
fingers crossed.
And, I don't want to pick on you, but I would love you to not use the word choice when you talk about, you're a good kid. And I could hear you catch yourself. So I know that you're kind
I
of like,
don't
wait.
know what else to use. Yeah. So
Well, you can just say something like, you're a good kid who sometimes has a hard time or sometimes makes mistakes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The reason I use choice is just to explain, not being defensive. I'm always open to any new language, but they use in school.
I know in school they
choices. Yeah. So I've just been sort of using the words.
And I have a problem with that. Because nobody is sitting there thinking, I have two choices here when my friend pushes me in line. I can either be calm or I can push them back. No kid is thinking that.
No.
Nobody's making choices. And just even as parents, like you said, you applied it to yourself. You're not thinking, I can stay calm or I can yell my head off.
No.
Like, it's not a choice. Like,
it's a reaction.
It's a reaction.
And then you deal with it later. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
so sure. Choice has, when people say like, oh, this kid made a bad choice or, made good choices today or bad choices today, there's a built-in level of shame with that. So, and I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad, because I think people just don't sometimes understand that it's a reaction, that it's not a choice. But I think as much as we can just stay away from that language is helpful. So just, we all make mistakes sometimes, or we all do things that we wish we hadn't sometimes, I think is because we're also, we want people to take responsibility, but it's just not, it's the intentionalness that I think I want to get away from.
Yeah,
But
no, that's a good idea. Yeah. It's helpful to hear that because, again, I mentioned in the Facebook group one time about how, Thomas is one who struggles with the deep breathing. Like he doesn't breathe. He gets hyperventilating kind of thing when you try to deep breathe. I actually realized somebody said, if it doesn't work, don't do it. And I realized I am not actually leading him. They've been taught this in school. So he comes home and says, I can't take a deep breath. So then I'm trying to help him fix that problem, but it's not his solution. So I'm trying to fit into this sort of like, the suggestions from school are always, they're helpful. It's good to think about emotions and stuff. So the school is helpful, but it's not his way to do things. So he's trying to.
And sometimes I've heard that sometimes for people, deep breathing actually makes them feel worse because it draws attention to the fact that their breathing is shallow, and that makes them feel more panicky. So one thing you could try with him is, and people at home can't see me, but I put my hand on my chest, and one thing you can just try is like put your hand on your chest and give yourself a rub or something like that, like the physical touch instead of the deep breath, like give yourself a hug. That also can be regulating. So you could try one of those two things with him. When he says, I can't take a deep breath, say, don't worry about it. Why don't you give yourself a hug, or, give yourself a pet on the chest or something like that.
Okay, that's a good one. Because there's like I said, all these things kind of come home with him. He's got these great solutions in his mind that don't actually work for his body. So it's great to hear these sort of side steps that you can do. Like, don't worry about the breathing. We'll do something else instead. That's great to hear that.
And I just love just to like highlight again, if it's not working, don't keep trying to do it.
Yeah.
That's such good advice. If it doesn't work for you, you can leave it.
Yeah.
Well, it's great. I mean, I think that, I think my takeaways for you that I've seen you learning is that to be more gentle with yourself and, not be so hard on yourself. Yeah. Give yourself some compassion. I think I sent you the self-compassion break. And if anybody wants it, we'll put it in the show notes. But, doing a self-compassion break when things are hard and just stopping. And, it's the first step of being able to give compassion to a kid when they're having a hard time, is give compassion to yourself for how hard it is, what you're both going through.
Yeah. And I heard from somebody, maybe it was in one of the lessons. I'm not quite caught up on the lessons yet, but I heard in one of them about sometimes you don't have to say anything. Maybe it was one of the podcasts. But, if you're both sort of hijacked, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to give them the answer. You can just be quiet with them. I thought that was kind of mind blowing as well, because I'm a talker with him. It's like I try to reason him through it and it just doesn't work. Nobody's listening. So.
Well, his actual thinking brain is not online right then, right? Like his thinking brain is offline, and so trying to reason or reassure or any of that stuff is not going to land, because that's not the part of his brain that's in charge right then. And yeah, I think also out of our own anxiety sometimes of feeling like, I don't want them to be upset, or I need to fix it, like you said, then we tend to just talk too much because we're anxious or feeling nervous, and so.
Which
really
is
just
really just a
stopping and slowing
self-fulfilling
down.
prophecy, because a big trigger, I think, for a lot of people is not being listened to. So when you're talking at someone who can't hear you, it just makes you feel more escalated, and then they're getting escalated, and it just, yeah. So I'm going to try to practice sort of like mindful silence in those moments and just be there. And then I'm not feeling like I have to fix the problem. I think that's my biggest sort of hiccup, is trying to stopping myself from thinking I have to fix everything in the moment or stop the big feelings, which is the lesson I'm on right now. So.
Good. I love that. You're learning that. Yeah. Because the flip side of, we always think of, fixing it as nicer than saying like, stop crying, it's only your ice cream cone. But really they're the flip side of the same coin, which is, don't feel that way. This is an emergency. So just welcoming the feelings, allowing the feelings, and reminding yourself, this is not an emergency. These are just some big feelings that he's having.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm going to work on from now until forever, probably. But that's my sort of focus at the moment.
Good. Well, our intense kids are, challenging, but also a gift to like help us learn the things we need to learn.
It is interesting because I struggled with all the same things that he did. And I thought it was a product of like, I had a very disruptive childhood. There was a lot going on. And I thought, it was a product of the disruption that caused me to feel so anxious and so sensitive. And then to see that just because our household is decidedly not like my own childhood. And so to see that that's just something that happens through genetics, or like that he's watched from me maybe when I'm dealing with my family during family visits, it's really just interesting to see that the same things happening for him that happened for me, and then we can kind of go through it together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's like inherited nervous system predispositions. Like, if a person who has a sensitive nervous system, it's so much harder for them to stay regulated and calm, and they have to work a lot harder at it than somebody who has a more sturdy nervous system.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about when we're talking about easygoing or, big feelers.
Yeah.
Is like that nervous system, how sensitive or sturdy is the nervous system.
I'm looking forward to the workshop you're doing about like diverting
befriending your nervous system.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. That's part of the course. Yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, keep up all of this great self-work that you're doing. And you've cracked the code that when I work with clients, usually after a couple sessions, they say, this isn't even really about my child. This is just about me.
Yes. Yeah, I think I'm hitting that point now. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that your son has learned your nervous system patterns from you. He probably inherited them from you, but
Yeah.
There's no blame there. And there's also like wonderful benefits of being a deep feeler. I often feel like I have such big feelings, and they're always just like right below the surface, that multiple times a day I feel like tearing up about things, and not always sad things, but like joyful things or things that move me. And I'll like be talking about something, and all of a sudden, like, starting to cry about it. And it's just like, I don't know. I think that there's a gift in that too, right?
Yeah, it is really interesting to see, because he just sort of engages so deeply with things. So I see the benefits of it. We're sort of navigating these early, pre-impulse control things. And then after that, I think it'll be good for him.
You got it. All right. Well, I will see you in the course and the workshop. And thank you for sharing everything with all of our listeners. I know it's been really helpful. It will be helpful for them when they hear it.
Oh, excellent. It's been helpful for me too. Thank you so much for meeting with me.
Thanks, Samantha. Hey, wasn't that great how many ahas she had, and how much she felt more confident in herself as a parent just after our short time working together, and being able to, get that support along with the things she'd been learning about peaceful parenting. So if you would like some support, my team and I are here to support you. You can go to sararosensweet.com and get all the details about coaching and sign up for a free short consult to see how we can help you. We would love to support you on this parenting journey. Until next time. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.